Hush, John. Jan didn't know what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hi.
Glenn.
Oh my
Alvarez.
goodness, is that a haircut?
Yeah.
Oh,
I love it.
Summer haircut. Summer haircut.
Yeah, looks
Well,
really good on you.
my sister has welcomed me back into the family.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, it suits you.
Okay,
Good for summer.
yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
kind of like the other way.
It wouldn't stay out of my face. I had to go.
Isn't that irritating?
When they were in grade school, my two sons horrified my wife by coming home finding the clippers with which she sometimes gave them haircuts, and each of them buzzed their heads completely at the end of the school year. So
Oh, boy.
at least you didn't do that, Alvarez.
Nope, I didn't. I did not do that.
I still have my COVID ponytail going.
Oh, good for you.
This was definitely my COVID thing. Oh, yeah. No more barber during the pandemic.
No, I still haven't been.
Walter, are you truly on a swing?
Actually, I'm on my deck.
Oh,
So-
Oh, nice.
I would say I'm out here because I can, but the truth is my son is in the basement and the loft is much too warm right now. And I didn't have time to get back in the office. That's the truth. So this is not bad though.
Good to see you.
Is your son doing drums practice?
No, he's on his own meeting.
I like the backdrop.
How old is he? Well,
He's 21.
okay.
Oh, wow,
So yeah, home from college this summer, going back in the fall.
Oh, great.
nice.
where does he go?
He's at UVA. Yep, very excited about the baseball game today. I don't know if anybody's following that, but
So did
UVA
they win?
baseball's they did. They're in the College World Series. They're going to Omaha.
Wow.
Oh, great.
We'll have to see if LSU is going to be a competitor.
Wow.
No, that's a real baseball team this year. They're good. All right. Well, we should probably get started. It's 7:02. Welcome, everybody. Jose, do you have the agenda that you can put up there? Let's go to that. All right. So we have a few updates to get started. Equity, public health, economic development, parks, open space, and housing. And then there are two documents that had been circulated a few days ago. One was on heritage resources. Chris is going to talk about that. And then a draft of the energy and environment section. And Bill, I'm probably going to call on you for that one, if that's okay. All right. And then we're going to continue through basically the other parts of the TSAs with Commissioner Carter, but we are still holding off on Reston Town Center North, and that'll be coming at a future meeting, but we'll see if we can get through all the others today or tonight. I would say tonight, but it's still sunny out here, so it doesn't feel like night right now. All right, any questions on the agenda? Okay, then let's go ahead and start. Michelle, do you want to give us an update on what's coming next on equity and public health?
Hi everyone. Yeah, we're going to be meeting next week, and we're I think going to finalize the equity guidelines or guidance, and then also get started on community health. So we'll have more to share soon.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Any questions for Michelle?
Not a question, but really more for the agenda item. I think that we had agreed that we were going to refer to this instead of public health, that we were going to call it community health.
Oh,
Is that?
I think that was me
Yes,
more doing a
understand
copy
that.
paste. So
Oh,
I'll make
okay.
sure not to do that again.
No
Good.
worries, Jose.
Good catch, Lynn. As a matter of fact, I think you could probably fix it right now. There we go.
Thank
Done.
you.
Very good. Thank you, Lynn. All right. Anything else on equity and community health? All right. So economic development. Gary, I think you have the pen there. You can give us an update on that.
Yes, working with Charles Kapoor of the Chamber of Commerce. And we've had a meeting and other discussions and have a little initial draft looking at it, and talked also to John Carter and coordinating with the equity group. So it's moving along, but I want to ask Charles if he wants to talk a little bit about what we're looking at. If Charles is on, I don't know if he's on.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Gary. It's been a pleasure to connect with you the last couple of weeks and have a chance to work on this. Essentially, you know, kind of the direction that we're taking with the economic development. When I say we, really, Gary, and I'm just adding my 2 cents in where I can. The exciting thing for me to be part of this process is to see how the economic development piece really runs through so many of the other components of the plan, and hopefully what the group will be able to be presented is a document that really highlights Reston as being a place that is open and inviting for businesses, and by extension then the employees of those businesses as a place to live, work, and play. And you know, a document that really stresses the fact that all of the amenities and infrastructure resources that we've been talking about as residents that we all want to see are the same things that will attract those high value businesses to come here because they see that as being vital to attracting and retaining the workforce that they want. And then finally, hopefully this document will be able to highlight the opportunities for collaboration within the community to maximize the benefits of being in Reston by both the commercial and the residential organizations that operate here in Reston. Gary, did I do a decent job of
that sounds perfect, and we're trying to make sure it's small businesses, and to talk about your point, Mr. Alcorn, on the chain businesses. Why we're not opposed to those. We want to make sure we're giving everybody an opportunity in business, and as well as diverse employees. So I think that's where we're headed, and trying to make sure we're also covering some of the areas that you highlighted in your economic diversity presentation a couple of times. Some of those are in land use, and trying to make sure we're keeping our eye on what you brought up, and covering those areas as well. And if I can just kind of jump down for just a quick second, it just reminds me when we're talking about some of these things, whether that's development or business or so forth, how people are choosing to invest in Reston. And I always enjoy hearing Mark Looney talk about those issues. So if we have a chance to hear Mark tonight, if he's on, talk a little bit about what is it that causes somebody to want to invest in Reston, for instance, versus other areas. What are those decisions that go into that? So sometime if we could do that, that might be interesting and helpful.
Gary, that's a great idea. And maybe actually when you come back, when you and Charles come back with that, let's set aside a little bit of time for that discussion. I mean, heck, we just landed Starkist, right?
Right.
They're swimming to Reston. That's a really
by Starkist.
But no, I think it is very helpful to know sort of what's been driving recent activity, both the high profile stuff, but also a lot of the businesses that aren't as high profile.
Right.
And Charles, I know, through the chamber, you're in touch with a lot of folks and can get I think a pretty good sense what attracts economic activity to Reston, and I think that could be very useful.
Indeed.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. Any questions or comments on the economic development section? All right. Well, Gary, Charles, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for taking that on.
My pleasure.
Pleasure.
Okay, then let's move on. Parks and open space. Jennifer, are you on? I believe you have the pen for that one at this point.
I'm not sure I have the pen, but I've been scheduling or working with Jose, who's been really helpful to schedule the people who said they were interested to get together. And we have 2 meetings that are scheduled. Jose was going to send out links to those. If anyone wants to join us, feel free to let Jose know, and I'm sure he can get you the links. But we're going to concentrate mostly on things that we've heard a dichotomy of opinions on in that section versus more specifically on the actual language or text in the section. And so if we can decide in a small group how to handle those items, then we'll go ahead and put pen to paper and make sure they're included. And if not, then bring the 2 pieces or 5 different sides of the topic to this group and see if we can't do a vote so that we know what we're going to include in the end in that chapter. So we might have at least partial update next meeting, and then hopefully the meeting after that will either bring you another final product or a second set of issues, and then we're planning to be done with that one.
Fantastic. That all sounds reasonable. Thank you, Jennifer, for taking that on.
Yeah, and if there's anything that you guys think that should be discussed, feel free to email Jose or the listserv, and we'll make sure to include it in the subgroup.
Very good. Any questions or comments for Jennifer?
Walter, this is David Bennell. Just a note. I know that the documents we've been given indicate that everybody is in favor of putting in artificial turf in places of sports things, sports fields, and there's a certain inevitability to that. Everybody wants to be the most modern and all that other stuff, but there are some, as I understand it, there are some issues with artificial turf. One of which was the little tiny rubber balls that fit in between all of the pieces of the artificial turf.
Is that crumb rubber?
Do pose a health hazard especially to young kids, because they slide in, or they whatever, get tackled, or they get bumped and land on the ground, and you can inhale those things. I'm sure that once these things are installed, the cost of maintenance is, in comparison to grass fields, is probably reduced. But I think we ought to, before we go blindly into doing that, I think we ought to at least consider the risks to that. I also understand, I don't have any specific facts to back it up, but I understand also that people who are used to playing on grass fields can sometimes injure themselves, making a quick turn. Soccer people and all that, soccer players and all, sometimes injure themselves because the friction is much different on an artificial turf field than it is on a regular grass field. So
yeah,
take that
David,
under
you're right
advisement.
about that. And you might know that most or maybe even all of the professional soccer players play on natural grass fields because they feel that it is less likely to cause them injury. And also on the cost, remember that the life expectancy of a turf field is 8 to 10, maybe even 11 years. And then it's several $100,000 to replace. So if you look at the long term, you need to compare the cost between natural and turf, and I don't know that it's necessarily that much cheaper to have a turf field.
On the other hand, I'm told that turf fields permit playing a greater percentage of the year and longer hours, so that they get greater utilization. It's all balancing.
All different factors.
So you
Well-
all just got a flavor of exactly what we'll be talking about in the subgroup, because that is one of the issues that I've seen go into the Parks and Open Space and come out back and forth. So it will be on the list of decisions that we'll ultimately need to make.
All right, very good. Thank you for that demonstration. That's exactly, that exactly proves your point. But no, I do appreciate Jennifer having these discussions, flushing them out, see where they go, because many of these things, they're not necessarily obvious slam dunks one way or the other, and they do require judgment call. And I would very much appreciate see if there is a consensus, or at least a majority of the task force going in one of these directions or others. So thank you. Any other issues on parks and open space? All right, thank you, Jennifer. So let's go to housing. Jose, what do we have on housing tonight?
I know St. Clair's is on, but I know staff will be prepared, I think, at the July 6th meeting with information on the WDU policy for the group.
Yeah, Jose, that is correct. That is a target, the July 6th meeting. And just to bring back information for the task force to hear on the WD policies, and, then the task force can, deliberate based on that information.
Okay, thank you, St. Clair. Any questions or comments on housing on that part of the comp plan?
All right, Walter, this is David again. Just if we could see to it that whatever is presented by staff, can we get an advance peek at it so that we can formulate some questions and possible solutions?
Yes, we can definitely make sure that the task force gets an advanced copy ahead of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, David. Tammy, I see your hand up.
Thank you. We need a task force person to chair that chapter. David Fennell, can you do that, please?
Sure, why not?
Thank you. We need a touchstone.
Thank you for
A bunch of us
volunteering, David.
are interested in it, but are working on multiple chapters. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Tammy.
Could I ask one question? And
Please,
that is,
Bill.
yeah, one bit of guidance that would be helpful. I've heard mixed things on this, is whether Fairfax is limited by the Dillon rule from requiring more WDUs or affordable housing or whatever, or whether it's entirely up to the county how much it requires. So if you could just address that when you come back, that would be helpful to know, to give us some sense of boundaries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And on that note, and maybe other things related to WDUs, David, you might also want to get in touch with Steve Cherney. Steve was on the WDU task force along with John Carter. He might have some additional insight as well that would help.
No, I'll certainly do that. I know Steve.
Okay, great. Excellent.
And one more comment on housing. We're particularly interested how to preserve the affordable housing that we already have. That is our challenge. That is one of our challenges. And I think probably segueing with Michelle's group on equity, well, obviously the two will be linked, but thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Tammy. And David, thank you. Appreciate that.
It was
All
like
right,
in the
any other-
Army, I got volunteered.
Yeah, you got volunteered. That's all right. Thank you very much. Totally fine with me. So any other questions or comments on housing?
I'll just say I can't wait to hear David's response as to what authority he has on the percentage of WDUs. That'll be, I think everybody's asking that question.
Yeah, maybe he might have to go find a crystal ball on that one, but
Or just make up a number.
yeah. Right. Right. Or talk to a friend on the Virginia Supreme Court. I don't know. Okay. Well, thank you. This is, I look forward to that coming back and having a good task force discussion on that. Okay. Anything else?
Walter?
Yes. Is that John?
It is indeed. Thank you. And this is somewhat out of order, but it's an update, but not on a chapter. I just want to make sure that all members of the task force know that tomorrow evening from 7 to roughly 10, the Reston Association Board of Directors is holding a work session where Larry, Jennifer, and I will update them on what we're doing in the comprehensive plan. Walter's going to be able to be there for a short time. Obviously, everybody, it's an open meeting, so anybody can listen in. And what we hope to do is update them on progress thus far, tasks ahead of us, and then to see if there are any points on which the board believes that it will need to give me and Larry and Jennifer direction on what RA's position is on certain things. So it's a checkpoint that you may be interested in tuning in on. I wanted you all to know that. So we will be discussing briefly all the chapters.
Can you put the link on Reston.org?
The link.
Larry, do you know what it is?
Yeah, the link is, if you go to the calendar on our, on our website, the web track calendar, I think the link is populated there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So it's the link on the Reston Association's calendar?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Here in a minute.
Yeah, and Larry, maybe you could throw it in the chat as well if you get a chance.
I was just going to ask if you could do that.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, and maybe also email it to everybody.
Okay, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, John. And yes, I have an earlier commitment, but I'll be joining that meeting late, probably, well, before 8 o'clock anyway. So I get a chance to hear the discussion and the feedback.
But I wanted to be sure that everybody knew that it was happening.
Thank you for that announcement.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Any other items before we head to Heritage Resources?
Yes, please. Tammy, again.
Yeah, Tammy, go ahead. Hi, Tammy.
I have a quick question. We discussed arts, public art, way back when, and got wonderful, presentations from folks. I think it's a chapter that almost writes itself, if not using what's already there. But I thought it was supposed to be its own chapter. Is that correct?
Jose, do you, I know there was some, well, frankly, there was some staff turnover at Public Art Reston in the middle, and I'm not sure where that ended up. Jose, do you have any insight in that?
I thought it was its own thing.
Yeah,
I know we got comments on the public art, back in January, and I thought I sent an updated version of it, but let me dig my email and send it around again.
I think that's correct, Jose, that we actually went over that.
Yeah,
I thought it was going to be, we even talked about that versus, maybe it's my memory, but that versus Parks and Open Space. And we decided to, as a group, as a task force, to kind of leave that by itself, and we all kind of went through it. I'm only saying that because I just hate to see this go, back around to another time when we've already done it.
Yeah, let me send around the recent version again, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I sent a lot of comments on that.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
So if we could go through that real quick, I mean, they're not significant.
Well, we're not going to go through it now, but we just so that we know it's its own chapter.
Yeah, and we'll put that on the next meeting agenda.
Okay, great.
Okay, Tammy, thank you for flagging that. And we'll probably also need to scrub everything, make sure we're not leaving anything behind.
Oh, we are, and that's public facilities, and I don't know who's going to chair that one. That's a chapter that is required that has no, to my knowledge, has no chair yet. Maybe somebody who hasn't been on a bunch of committees could take that on.
Well, Tammy, you're doing a pretty good job volunteering others, but if you see
I'm not
anybody
I'm not
else-
doing, sorry, that's, I'm not doing that.
All right. Okay. Well, if anybody is interested in helping coordinate that, and being on point to oversee, because it's public facilities is, the biggest public facility system we have is the school system.
Right.
And we do have somebody coming back on that. So, and then looking at, obviously library, police, fire, and,
Health and
and
Human
then
Services,
health and human services, sanitary, sewer,
water. Yeah.
So, I think most of that should be okay, but schools in particular, and maybe some of these other systems need a little bit more discussion.
The issue prior time with if I may, Mark Malcolm, was that there were location, general need, but with that, not a path forward to actually execute with what were the public facilities before. There was a lot of discussion in several of the civil meetings after the working groups had done their thing in the community discussion. I say this to you because it will be something that you need to be cognizant of. The public will want to know more than what will probably be written in the comprehensive plan at this stage.
Mark, that's a really good point. And, there may be some things, maybe some policies, maybe some implementation strategies that need to go in parallel with some of these items. Including perhaps looking at the capital improvement program, some things like that to make sure. I know the challenge gets to be when we get beyond that 6-year period of the capital improvement program and things get fuzzier.
Very much so. And because of the way that the schools are programmed differently from the rest of infrastructure, that's not well understood by the public at large, and just want to make you sensitive to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, I know you're doing some other stuff, but perhaps you could help us with the public facilities portion.
I'm actually out of town for the next 2 weeks.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll see if we have a volunteer by then, but thank you, Mark, for that input. Any other comments or questions on public facilities? Okay. Anything else before we move into heritage resources? Okay, then let's do that. Chris, I believe, yes, Chris Daniel, there you are. All right, go ahead and take it away.
I'm happy to share. So, Jose shared out the draft section.
Okay.
I actually learned a lot from this process, and I think it might be a little informative to some of the other folks. So it was mentioned last time that I sent this section to staff, and upon doing so, got some general input, and then it almost got pulled into a black hole of review, and then I yanked it back out to bring it back to all of y'all. The original heritage section in 2017 comp plan is fairly brief. And it's rather, I would call it sanitized language in the sense that it doesn't really provide much direction other than the fact of, hey, heritage resources exist, which I don't necessarily know is always so helpful for developers. And as we all know from the presentation from county staff, there was recently a survey down at Reston that has identified several other potential heritage resources. Now, the caveat, just to help inform everybody, that survey just determined if they were potential ones to actually become a heritage resource. A nomination form has to be filled out and submitted through the Fairfax County History Commission. It's not something that's just done out of the blue. So county commission volunteers sometimes do it on their own. Homeowners can do it on their own. Task force could do it on their own, but it's not something that's automatically done based on that survey. So what the updates that you'll see in this, just to give you a general perspective, wanted to do was provide a little bit more emphasis on trying to consider reuse if possible, as well as highlighting the fact that Reston has a lot of potential heritage resources that have both somewhat been surveyed and need to be surveyed. And that challenge actually, I think, is the biggest constraint. So highlighting that information I thought was going to be really helpful. So county staff helped put together a map that would show folks where the surveys were conducted, but didn't necessarily list out properties, which me and county staff felt was a little too invasive since the properties haven't been listed as a heritage resource yet. But we thought it would be helpful for developers to know there's data here about what has been identified, and it's something that should be kept in mind. The only person that provided me comments right now is Jan, most of which were very easy to address. The big one you brought up, Jan, that I think I want to point out, you asked about Sunset Hills and that table of known resources. Right. Sunset Hills refers to the Abram Smith Bowman house where AFMA is, and it just isn't labeled very well on the maps. I think a lot of folks know it a little differently from the more formal name it has. So I think I'm going to work with staff to correct that on their listings anyways. I found out Association Drive is not officially a heritage resource, so it's struck from that list at the moment. It is a determined eligible property, but the History Commission has not done the effort yet to nominate it, as far as I've been told. The only other big sneaky things I put in there, just so I'll own them right now, just so folks can see them, other than talking about the identification and providing that map that shows where surveys have been done. I provided a section that speaks about heritage considerations and preservation incentives, which were just some general principles that I think, if were better emphasized, would help development consider certain options. The only one that I feel like is the most, I guess, may give staff heartburn, is I put in there that, you know what, if development chooses to incorporate heritage resources into their plans, they should maybe get some relaxedness on their proposed FAR. But that's me throwing out language that I don't necessarily am super accustomed to using, but I wanted to find a way to suggest to folks, if you have a heritage resource on your property and you can find a way to use it, we should try to find a way to go, this is an important thing to take care of, that's great, but that might be totally too far gone. Other than walking through that, I kind of would want to leave it open rather than going line by line and letting folks kind of, if you had a chance to look at it, feel free to give me your input on it. That was kind of a work of love by one.
Well, a very good one, Chris. Thank you. That's appreciate the time you put in it. And Jan's input as well.
I've
Jan,
got a
you have a
question.
question? Go right ahead,
Yes,
Jan.
go right ahead, Jan.
Okay, I appreciate it. So the Bowman House is the Sunset Hills Reston. Can we put in Bowman House?
I did. I've already made the change. The version you're looking at right now has the revision made to it.
And then the other Bowman, it's a distillery, and then we have the Wheelie Robert House. That's a big white house, right?
Yes. So the big white house is Sunset Hills, the Smith Bowman house. The Wheelie Robert House. So I brought this up just to help folks see. So here is a map of all the known heritage resources in Reston. You have the Wheelie Robert Wheelie House, Sunset Hills, which is the estate itself.
Chris,
and then you have the distillery.
Chris,
I think you have to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not so used to. I'm sharing the wrong thing.
I think you're sharing the application.
Hold on one moment.
Because I thought that the other one, the Wheelie Robert House,
There you go,
was on Old Reston Parkway.
I think that's the, isn't the Bowman Distillery?
The Bowman Distillery is the white structure on Weston. Reston.
Old Reston.
And then across the street where AFMA is the Sunset Hills is the formal name of the estate that Abram Boehm had. And so that would be the house that AFMA manages and takes really good care of.
Okay, very good. Then what about the house in the woods?
I do not, well, that would be the Robert Wheely house that I do not know a lot about. The problem with many of the resources over here, particularly, I would say the distillery and the Willie Robert house, is just, I mean, obviously stewardship and ownership. From my understanding from county staff, it's been almost impossible to get in touch with the owner of the distillery. So any dreams one might have of trying to encourage, you know, hey, opening up a new Willie Town Hall distillery location seems to be very difficult of getting a hold of property owners. And incentivizing there. Obviously, we're all familiar with Brown's Chapel and the Lake Ann Historic District, and I provided language that is pretty much identical to what's in almost every other section that speaks to the requirements that if you operate in a historic overlay district, you have special requirements you have to follow, which means applications need to go to the Architecture Review Board. This is almost identical from what you would see in most language, other than a bit more emphasis on why Lake Ann is important. Another thing I'll just highlight that's not related to this, but the ARB is actually updating our guidelines for the first time since 1992 for each of our districts. And Lake Ann is actually being reviewed internally by ARB members right now and will be presented to the greater public along with all the other ones later this year. But Jan, you said you might have other questions, so I don't want to give you short shrift. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. The other question is, what about the pavilion?
My understanding is, unless the pavilion is considered part of the Bowman Abram Smith the location, the actually Sunset Hills location, then I don't know if it is a heritage resource at this moment. There are 151 potential resources listed in the Reston area, but those are not heritage resources. And that's the big crux of things that I was trying to emphasize to folks is to be considered a heritage resource, you have to be listed on the county list, which means there has to be a nomination. So I know there's been a lot of conversation about protecting the golf courses and things like that. The golf courses were considered eligible properties, potentially eligible properties. There would have to be a nomination done for them and submitted to the History Commission before they actually would be considered a heritage resource. Until then, they are represented in this map you see here that show the areas in the
question. I'm sorry, I'm still back on that.
It's all right, Jan.
The pavilion was part of the Bowman house. It got moved.
Well, then I'm assuming it's a part of that. I'll have to work with county staff to find out.
Okay, because it was moved.
I'll inquire to find out what they might know about it.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay.
All right, Jan, thank you. I see John Mooney has his hand up, as well as Lynn and Tammy. So John and then Lynn.
Thank you, Walter. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to commend Chris for the clarity and comprehensiveness of this. I found it excellent. I need to think more about the possible FAR incentive for preserving heritages, but I found it an excellent piece of work, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I agree.
I think it comes from being a federal employee. I learned to write like this for my own job, so it just kind of comes with the nature. But thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Lynn and then Tammy.
Yeah, I have 3 points that I'd like to make. First of all, Chris, great job. For you to capture what you did in 5 pages during this exercise is commendable. Thank you. The second item, I just wanted to bring it to the group's attention in case anyone forgot. AFMA has proposed a redevelopment of that property, but it is office, so it's not high rise. I mean, I think that as I look at some of the projects that have come before the Fairfax County and Reston Association in terms of a redevelopment. This is one of those redevelopments that really fits within the defined design guidelines. And I'm really impressed with what they're planning on doing. And then finally, in respect to the golf courses, it's my understanding that not just anyone can bring forth an application for a heritage resource, that it has to be the owner. Am I misinformed there?
I am only going to speak from some knowledge because the History Commission, not the board I'm chairman of, handles that. But it's my understanding that they can be submitted by anyone, but there is obviously an important consideration of the property owner in that process. And so since I don't personally know how that process goes, I just happened to inquire with the History Commission about, well, there are properties in Reston that I think there might be groups that would love to have them listed on the heritage list. I imagine many of the clusters might really appreciate it because they truly love their clusters. I did not know how it was done because my board doesn't do it. And so I then got told, well, Chris, if you want, you can draft one yourself. And I said, the commission members do it on their own unless a property owner chooses to do it. So unless county staff knows any more about it, but my understanding is I believe a property owner can obviously raise concerns. But the other thing is being a heritage resource does not provide any further protections, actually. It's only if that heritage resource is within a historic overlay district, like Lake Anne, is there even any level of oversight like the Architectural Review Board. So even if the golf course were listed, they could still do as a private owner what they chose to do without the ARB or any other board related to heritage resources saying no. We would just then require documentation. That is really, in Fairfax County, the big key thing is documentation of that property. So if you, with the API building, that was something that was asked for when it went down, was documentation of that structure, since it was a unique piece of architecture.
Thank you.
Oh, and Lynn, just for your mention about AFMA, the organization actually came to the Architecture Review Board voluntarily to bring their designs to get our input on how it might work well with the heritage resource, as well as being, as we also saw it, we wanted smart design in Reston. And so that was why I wanted to kind of flesh in here an encouragement of, if you're going to affect a heritage resource, consider seeking a workshop, which is a completely voluntary option, doesn't have any ARB approval, but does kind of lend a level of, support to a design that affects a heritage resource. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right, Tammy has her hand up, and then David Vanell.
Thank you. The AFMA project came before Reston zoning, and I believe it's been approved. So, and during that presentation to us, the cupola, or I guess pavilion, or whatever you're calling it, is that the little white, Victorian style octagonal thing down by the stream?
Like the gazebo?
Gazebo, thank you. Thank you. Searching for that word. Thank you, Lynn. Anyway, that was that they were adamant they were keeping that. We were very concerned, were they going to get rid of that? So I believe that's been, and John Carter, you can chime in on that. I believe that's gone and approved, and that project is on its way. At least it came through us long ago. One of the heartbreaks I've had living here for 45 years was the destruction of the API building. And the fact that the county would have such a treasure in its, within its borders, and allow that to be razed. I cannot get over that. And in addition to that, there were photos of the demolition with the furniture still in it. That Marcel Breuer, I'm sure that somebody went in and got some of it out, but that furniture alone is priceless. A desk today was on for auction for $26,000, one desk. So the fact that we lost that whole building is a tragedy, and I guess we can't put the cautionary tale in this chapter about losing that treasure. Can we? Walter, do you know?
You mean to put some,
Yeah,
well, I
that,
mean, it's,
you know,
it's,
I mean,
it's
if
done,
it's
but,
solely owner driven, unless
oh,
it's decreed to be an overlay, historic overlay district, um, that was so tragic how that was done. And it could have been the most phenomenal regional library on the planet. You know, with the stadium seating, it had the right square footage. People test. I mean, I was there at the P&Z meeting when the owner's rep was asked, "Is there any historic resource on this property?" And she said no. And people in the audience, I didn't know anything about that this was property was involved, spoke it up immediately and said, yes, yes, there is. And there was a big to-do in that meeting, and it went on. And, you know, that this was just done so easily. It was just, oh, it was hard as hell to knock the thing down. There was more rebar in there than in, you know, 6 Home Depots. But it was just a tragedy. Is there any way we can reference that, not to let any, I mean, there isn't anything else in Reston, to my knowledge, comparable. So we're a day late and way short, but
yeah.
has it ever
Tammy,
been put in? I'm not sure of
mm,
the appropriateness of putting in, but
yeah, I would, maybe it's something for Chris to, think about and maybe check with county staff on the heritage resources side and see if there's precedents in other parts of the comprehensive plan. I think you're right, Tammy. I mean, that really was, that was unique. I mean, it really was. And, I mean, not that we don't have very, you know, other sites and buildings and structures, that are worthy of preservation. Chris, is this something you've looked into?
So what I attempted to do, because when I think of plan documents, I see them as trying to be forward-looking. So I recognize that trust me, the Architecture Review Board was ferocious in its frustration about this too. I would say that's one of the reasons you have me here. Other than living in Reston, we've been trying to be more active in the planning process, because we feel as a board it's our job to help advise folks. And Supervisor Alcorn was willing to listen to the ARB and let us participate and said, oh, you got residents in Reston? Well, sure, we want you here. So that's why I put this emphasis on prioritizing further identification efforts, because even though we did a survey, which we got cost matching grants for, and I will point out the state who helped us do that was excited about it, because Reston is known for having a lot of modern and postmodern architecture examples amongst it. We still have a lot more that has not been surveyed. And I felt like if we made that a important priority in here, it still put an emphasis on not just the developer, but on the county in some respect, that could kind of help county staff say, well, this is a priority in the plan. Maybe we should try to appropriate more staff time, or again, support cost share grants when the ARB helps seek them. If I tried to sneak it in where it came across as a way to incentivize a preservation mindset, recognizing that the larger county plan has a whole preservation policy section that I didn't want to try to regurgitate here either, because it literally already exists. Could use an update in itself, but that's not what we're here to solve today.
right. And Chris, to your credit, I want to give you additional, yeah, you did a super duper job. Your attitude is just amazing, and I'm so glad you're on the task force and handling this. Thank you so much. Very, very impressive work.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Let's go to David Vanell.
Thank you, Walter. I'm going to do some editorializing here. First of all, Chris, this is a terrific piece of work, and I'm coming, as Tammy is, I'm coming from what I thought was an extremely disappointing result of from the county North County, or from the county government center, when they had the supervisors meeting to vote on this Breuer building. The historical commission did what they could. I think one or two of the members of the commission testified in front of the county or the county commissioners, and there was just no teeth in what they could do, because at that point, the building hadn't been declared anything in particular, and the state hadn't certified it. So I am 100% behind what you're doing here, Chris, and the content and the ideas that you've got in here. And I would be 150% behind it if we could figure out a way as a group to help the county build some teeth into these the controls, if you will, or oversight, if you will, of historic sites. The Seacus builders had a proffer in there about putting an artistic, useful monument to that building, and to my knowledge, they have done squat about that. So maybe that's something for the staff to look into.
Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, sir. I think there could be more placed in here if we wanted to emphasize certain. So I saw in here, obviously, a question about association drive as well, about properties and ideas. Again, I think the key thing is, obviously, we could try to, again, leverage active in innovative thinking in those areas. And that's where, obviously, I'm trying to, in other sections of the plan update, put those emphasis, like you saw me mention to John Carter during the last session, about the parcel that has association drive, to try to encourage that type of development if we can. Recognizing that obviously there are, limited tools in our tool set, and I am open to hearing other suggestions that folks would like to suggest to put in there, and recognizing obviously that there are limits to the powers we have beyond the historic overlay district tools. Though I will point out, River Farm, which is down in Mount Vernon district, is going to be turned into a historic overlay district in lightning speed. So sometimes when folks want a historic overlay district, it can happen super fast. But the ARB is also considering 2 overlay districts for 2 large neighborhood communities in the Mount Vernon district that are going to be much more contentious as they go through the review process, because obviously you have many individual property owners, and they are obviously going to bring themselves under a lot more potential considerations if they become an HOD.
Yeah, Chris, thank you. I was going to mention River Farm earlier too, and that is a very rare example of a property owner not being part of the application to be in a historic overlay district or designated as such. So it does happen, but it's pretty unusual. So, all right, thank you, Chris. Any other comments or questions on heritage resources?
Where is River Farm?
It's on the Potomac. It's in the Mount Vernon district. I believe it's next door to Mount Vernon, isn't it?
It's down the way from or up the way from Mount Vernon, I believe,
Yeah,
and is the former or still site of the American Horticultural Society's headquarters that they are looking to sell because they are coming on harder times. I mean, it's also right along the Parkway as well, so it's a gorgeous piece of a gorgeous historic property that has a long history, obviously, as you can imagine, with both colonial going up all through through Fairfax history of development. Even the Horticultural Society, I would say, since how long it's been there as a tenant, kind of sets a period of its history.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just note, it's also, the complexity here is it's also zoned R2, which means you could put 2 homes per acre, I believe is what it is. I don't know, I may have that wrong. But anyway, it's zoned to allow by right lots of homes being built. And that's what their board was looking at. So, okay. Any other questions for Chris or on heritage resources? All right, very good input. Appreciate everybody reading through this and providing feedback. Chris, do you have what you need to go forward?
I believe I do. I guess the next step would be, if I understand this correctly, is bring something more formal forward for a kind of consensus vote, and then we would send it on with the rest of the stuff we're stamping to say is ready to go in the final package.
Yep, into the final draft. That's right. Okay, good. So if anyone has any additional comments or suggestions or questions, please do get in touch with Chris very soon. And Chris, thank you for pulling that together.
Absolutely.
All righty. So let's move on to the next topic, energy and environment. Bill, I believe this is yours for at least an overview or introduction.
Yeah, Tammy and I worked on this. We also brought in an individual, Doug Britt, who's not on the task force, but was deeply familiar with the move in Reston to go to a biophilic community and on a variety of other things like the Razor reports and the like. And he wasn't speaking for anybody but himself, but he gave us some useful, very useful input. We began from Jose sending us in Word all the parts of the existing comp plan which address environment, and that's a lot of different parts. We distilled it down to 2 sections. One, an embellishment on the vision section that's in there now, and the other is to deal with environmental stewardship section. We introed that with a discussion of the biophilic Reston concept and just sort of an overview and summary. The main areas where there were changes from the existing comp plan included the emphasis on climate change and the hazards created by that, and the fact that everybody, building and otherwise, needs to be addressing it going forward. Stormwater management, one of the things that comes out of climate change is the fact that a 2-year storm is pretty irrelevant at this stage, and all the measures of what needed to be done on stormwater impact were tied to the so-called 2-year storm. Since we've had, a couple of 100-year storms in the last 2 years, it seems like that measure is inappropriate. So we modified it to insert 100-year storm. I expect we will hear back from other people that that's too strong, and that's something we can discuss. But I wanted to highlight that because it's clear that we have to look ahead to the kind of storms we're going to be facing and already are. The water resources management was modified, some, not a huge amount. Same with tree canopy goes. The next big one was the green building practices, where we strengthened the proposed, or draft strengthens the requirements for getting to net zero, since the goal of the state is to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2045. You have to start now. So we moved on that by increasing the energy efficiency requirements. We're proposing to increase the energy efficiency requirements for new construction to LEED Gold for residential and LEED Platinum for commercial and office. Introduced the idea of having new construction be zero net carbon on site, which is eminently doable with today's technology. It's not a difficulty, and a plan to get to 2045 to be net zero on a source basis, which is also eminently doable since our electric utilities are required to get to net zero by 2045. Introduced the idea of some reporting on energy consumption in the hopes of getting to some benchmarking, and introduced, because vehicles are a major source, one of the 2 major sources of CO2, upgraded the recommended we would propose required electric vehicle charging standards for new buildings. We know Ford has already said it'll be selling 40% of its cars by 2030 will be electric vehicles. People are calling for at least 60% of new vehicles to be new vehicles to be electric vehicles. So we proposed in there that buildings be ready. They don't have to have all the chargers in there, but be ready for charging that type of load of electric vehicles. Require bird-friendly design for tall buildings. And so various things like that are in here. It is not going to be without controversy, but given the situation we're in and the types of construction we're getting, we think it's appropriate. The lighting impacts is based on, is mostly new, and the transportation section is mostly new. Otherwise, things are fairly similar, not entirely, but fairly similar to what was there before. So we're looking forward to getting questions and comments in writing or otherwise. Jan has had a couple questions, which I can answer now or later. But that's what's in here, and it's long enough. You may not have read it yet. Please do and give us your comments.
I'd like to jump in here with Bill, please. This is
Please.
Tammy.
Go right ahead, Tammy.
A couple of things. I apologize for both of us that at one point we had page numbers on this. Please, everybody put page numbers as Chris did on his document so that as we discuss them, you can say page 3, and people know where to go and look. Obviously we have a couple typos that are easily corrected, but I do have a huge question, as does Bill, about the 100-year storm thing. I've been talking to a hydrologist trying to get a better view what the correct metric is that we will have to put in here to, obviously we've had so many giant storms, a couple huge ones and within 2 years of one another. So this climate change is a real deal and we've got to deal with it. So what metric we should use is a question that I'm trying to get, that we are both trying to get an answer from. Also, on page 4, bullet 6 or item 6 has to do with the flooding off of Sunset Hill Road on our notoriously flooding cars up to above their roofs on a slanted hill on the VDOT parking lot on Sunset Hills. I can't figure out physically how that happens, but the county has gone ahead and designed a 4-acre retention pond to be placed on Hidden Creek Country Club with no notice to anybody that this was going to go ahead and happen. And I very much object to that. Not only do the adjoining property owners in Isaac Newton and Golf Course Overlook not want to look at a 4-acre retention basin, that remediation technique is no longer deemed appropriate. And we are remediating sins of the past of upstream parcel owners that paved over parking lots before stormwater management was a thing. So I can't understand how we're now punishing another downstream property owner by putting a dangerous 4-acre retention basin and ugly on their property. But that is an issue I would like specified. Bill and I went around on this and he just wants it not to be just existing, just a neutral. I think we also, I I want to also ask the task force, does anybody else know of any area within Reston that floods? This is the one I'm aware of, but are there any others? If there are, please let us know. We want to mention the locations. Going down to wetlands, right below that on page 4, under Water Resources Management. The Herndon Monroe wetlands, I have a question on that. And that is, can the owners of a property that have a public health nuisance or danger, like the mosquitoes that are coming out of the unmaintained wetlands there, can they be required to remediate that by law, or are we just out of luck? I feel sick for the neighbors that are involved there. And I don't know what the law is what we could put in this document to require that they remediate their property as a health risk. So let's see. There's a couple of spacer errors. The other thing I have a question of, and this might come from staff, is down in the noise impacts. I know the interior spaces have to be remediated below 75 dBA. I think it's 45. So that's a correction that needs to be made, if staff could help with that. And I think that's it. I think, Bill did a magnificent job, and Doug Britt was a prince to help us with that. And I appreciate both of their efforts. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just note that on the noise, the numbers that are in here are numbers that are in the existing comp plan. So it may have been changed. But
well, I know that there
didn't
was a
change
big
any of
to do
those.
about this with the Sully Airport DBA. And I know that the interior noise there, certainly interior noise, was not going to be 75. So that's where I'm sensitive to it.
Yeah, like I say, I just took the language, and if it's different or should be different, that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to call attention that it should be different.
Sure.
Even if we change it and get, that 75 is outrageously loud. You couldn't stand that in your house for 5 seconds.
Tammy, if I could, let me try to clarify that, because I don't want people to be confused. The current county policy is that if there are locations, let me back up. If there are locations that are potentially noise impacted, set aside the airport for a second, but noise impacted, toll road noise, other highway noise, whatever it is, there is a prohibition on placing residential units in areas that have ambient noise levels above 75 dBA, irrespective of whether you can mitigate it down to where the interior noise upon completion of the residential unit is at or below 45 dBA. There is language in the Reston portion of the comp plan recognizing the toll road and the toll road's, I'll say, central location relative to the transit stations, recognizing that there's going to be residential that is potentially impacted or located in areas that have noise levels above 75 dBA as a result of the current and future toll road usage and the presence of the metro in the middle of the toll road as opposed to below grade or wherever it might otherwise be. So there is an exception that's available in the comp plan currently, but I don't know that it's ever been granted, meaning you could physically locate residential units in areas that are 75 dBA and above before you build. The requirement by standard is to mitigate interior noise down to at least 45 dBA through various construction techniques and materials. And outdoor urban parks and open spaces that are meeting the urban park standards are not allowed to be in areas that are above 65 dBA without mitigation, which is why you've had some conversations about noise walls and other mitigation measures in various zoning applications that have come forward since the 2014 comp plan amendments were adopted. So at no time are interior noises supposed to be at 75 dBA. In fact, there's not supposed to exceed 45 dBA. You just can't, by policy, you're discouraged from locating residential units in areas that are already above 75 dBA in terms of noise levels.
Thank you, Mark. That jives with what I understood.
Hey, Bill, can you go through my questions, my comments?
Yeah,
They're not too.
you had two questions and some, I mean, setting aside the recommendations for formatting. The two questions was, why did the introduction mention TSAs? Because you didn't think that was a biophilic issue. It isn't so much that it's a biophilic issue, except in the broader sense that it's a climate issue, because transit-oriented development is one of the modes by which one reduces carbon emissions, along with some of the other things that are mentioned in there. The other question you had, let me try to remember, I had it.
Do you really think it's appropriate there, or do we need more language?
I think in terms of a summary list, it's appropriate there. It's addressed elsewhere too, so if it weren't there, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it is an important part of dealing with climate issues.
Understood.
The other thing is, you had a question. There's in the transportation section, there is simply the statement that building and widening roads with concrete and asphalt also causes substantial carbon pollution in addition to inducing more traffic. And you asked if there was any way to build roads without concrete and asphalt. They, in fact, are working on methods of manufacturing concrete that would not produce anywhere near the kind of CO2 it does. But it's actually, concrete is one of the largest producers of emitters of CO2 in the world. So it's simply a comment. It doesn't say you can't do it, but it's just it is a comment. And as I say, they are working on greener concrete, if that's a concept.
That'd be a great place to put that in. I think that would be wonderful to put that in there. I do.
Well, this isn't a Britannica on stuff. We have to keep with what we're doing in Reston and what our recommendations are. Otherwise, our chapter will be, 20, 30 pages long. And we could maybe put a footnote somewhere, or an asterisk with a footnote, but I understand what you're saying, but there's so much stuff, so many details, so much is happening lickety split on new ways to construct buildings and structures, and understanding of how plants get along with one another underground. And I mean, the information is amazing, and we're trying to keep up and get as much as we can in this document. One item that I want to bring up.
Oh, by the way, I would like to say that it's only a sentence that he would have to put in. It's not going to make a whole big document here.
One item that I am concerned about, and I want to make this clear. Reston, we're talking about one Reston. The RA Environmental Action Committee was the founder or the impetus for getting Reston designated as biophilic, but not just RA Reston is biophilic. The whole one Reston is biophilic or needs to be. That's our aspiration to fight climate change. This certification to keep us on track to be able to live in our community. And this was what makes Reston different from other communities. So I want to be sure that's understood. Thank you.
Hey, Tammy, if I could, a quick comment on the noise issue. As we all know, as you drive out on the toll road from Tyson's, you see the large sound barriers on both sides of the road, all the way out until you get to Reston. Those, I don't know how tall they are, but they're very tall, and that's what it takes to minimize the noise from the way. We do not have that in Reston, and I would never want to see that in Reston. And if you can mitigate, I've got no problem. But if you look at developments like Roland Clark, where last I checked, there's a park that has to be shut down. No one can go into it in the evening because there's no way to reduce the noise levels on it. I think it's a serious issue. So if we're going to say that we can mitigate, that's fine. But I think there needs to be demonstrated that it actually is mitigated, not just that we're assuming it will be.
To your point, Dennis, that there are no noise walls in Reston is a little bit misleading. At least in our RPZ meetings, the builders go berserk trying to design sound walls that are attractive. And our committee's chair is especially sensitive to attractive sound walls.
Are there any that are in
a
Reston
sound
now?
wall on the north side of the toll road for Midline. At least we had lengthy meetings about the design thereof. So if it's residential, for sure there are going to be sound walls. I don't know what the deal is on Roland Clark, I guess because it wasn't residential and it turned residential, but the garage blocked. And I know exactly what you're talking about on Roland Clark. The garage was supposed to block the sound from the interior. Are you talking about the little bocce court that has to shut down?
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, well, that sadly is a case where we approved the existing project and the bocce court was added, and then the additional building on the west side of that parcel was also going to come in and be residential. And I just read, oh horrors, and my fear with most of these phase plans, that the plans to put another twin building in there have been dropped. So here we have a bocce court and an existing old office building that had, the reason it wasn't going to be developed right away is it had a lease they were waiting to end. And now all of a sudden the owners have said no.
Let me
And Mark,
interrupt
you know
you.
about this?
Yeah, let me interrupt you because none of that is accurate.
Well, that's what was in the paper.
Yeah, none of that is accurate because I worked on that project. The issue with the Roland Clark was it was originally a two-phase development with both buildings slated to be residential. Because it is in the residential mixed use zone, meaning the brownish red color and not the whatever the transit station mixed use color is, blue or purple, there was placed on it by staff an expectation that 25% of the square footage be commercial or non-residential, because there is language in the current comprehensive plan that says transit station areas within the quarter mile are generally supposed to develop as a 50-50 residential to non-residential mix on a global basis. And areas between the quarter and half mile or on the periphery, which the Roland Clark site is, were anticipated to have a 75-25 split on a macro basis. But as different applications came through and there were conversions from just office to just residential, there was a concern that there wouldn't be the 25-75 split. And that site was one of those that got caught up in that conversation, with an expectation that 25% of the total square footage in both phases be non-residential. And moreover, because the site is zoned PRC, set aside the 13 persons per acre cap, there is a cap on 50 dwelling units per acre on any individual site. And because these two buildings were going to replace or 2 residential buildings were going to replace 2 commercial buildings, the project as a whole exceeded the 50 dwelling units per acre. And so the decision was made to defer the second phase until a future change to the PRC zoning ordinance could occur to address the 50 dwelling units per acre cap, or the property was rezoned out of the PRC into a different zoning classification that didn't have that 50 dwelling units per acre cap. But they had to find the required urban parkland for meeting the phase 1. And so the bocce ball court, along with some other elements, were built on the portion of the property that was slated for phase 2 until phase 2 was ready to be brought forward. But because there was no building in place to block the noise from the toll road, that area is above the 65 dBA on an interim basis until phase 2 is constructed at some point down the line. And so that's the reason that it's shut off at night, is because until the second phase comes in, and that bocce ball court probably gets reprogrammed into some other urban parkland component, that's the requirement to meet the noise standards in the comprehensive plan as they currently exist. So that's why it was done that way, and it's really intended to be an interim condition until phase 2 is constructed. But we can't construct phase 2 until we address, 1, the 75-25 split, which I'm hoping we will get to at some point in this conversation, and 2, until the PRC zoning ordinance is amended to lift a 50 dwelling units per acre cap, or the property is rezoned out of PRC into something else. But that's the backstory of the bocce ball court.
Mark, a topic for a discussion for another time, but you may remember that when all this came up, there were a number of us that expressed skepticism that the promises that were being made would ever be fulfilled. We were assured that they were, and now I'm hearing you want to change the conditions. So
I'm not sure.
It's an ongoing issue. We don't have to fight it out now, but I think it is a concern that we need to deal with.
But Dennis, I'm not certain I follow what you're saying, because I don't know what promises or conditions were made, other than I can tell you most assuredly that the current owner of the 1950 building, which is the 5-story building that remains there today, would happily entertain a rezoning application tomorrow to initiate phase 2. But they're stuck because the way the 75-25 split has been interpreted is that they've got to dedicate 25% of the total square footage of the 2 phases to non-residential development, where the only way in and out of the property is through townhouses. And the concern is that no commercial is going to be, or limited commercial is going to be viable in that location. And I think if we could address the 75-25 split and the 50 dwelling units per acre, I guarantee that owner would be in tomorrow with a proposal to do it. And my guess is that the builder of the phase 1 development would be happy to do it for them, because they really wanted to do both phases to begin with. But we're stuck with those 2 limitations.
Topic for another day, but my memory is that we were told that the 25% would be met in the second phase of the project. There was no discussion about we're going to change the rules that they knew going into this project existed.
Fine, we can agree to disagree, but
I would make just one last thing I want to say at this stage, and that is, one of the things we've tried to say in here is that Reston is different, wants to be different, and wants to be a leader in the county on the issues of environmental protection, sustainability, and the like. So we recognize some of what we're proposing in here goes beyond the normal practices, but we think it's appropriate, and we would like to find a way to get it implemented and enforced to be ahead of the game. Because in the long run, for buildings that are going to last 50 to 100 years, you have to build them to be ready for the circumstances that are going to be hitting us in the next 10 or 15 years. And looking backwards to what worked before is no longer appropriate. So that's in there too, for your reading pleasure.
All right, thank you, Bill. You know, there've been a lot of comments in the chat. Does anybody want to bring any of those for discussion?
I've got a couple suggestions, if I could.
Yeah, John.
These are suggestions that, I guess Tammy mentioned this earlier, the flooding that's in Reston. We're probably in crisis mode there. I don't mean to overemphasize it, but there are three areas. Both affect getting emergency vehicles to the new residential in the TSA areas. One is the flooding that occurs on Sunrise Valley between Wheelie and American Dreamway. That floods quite often. We have cars floating, and that really needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed upstream. It's primarily because of VDOT's surface parking lot that has no stormwater management. And the pipe system there is not adequate. So I think it would be worth a mention of flooding. The second one is Wheelie Avenue itself between North Shore and Sunrise Valley Drive. That floods every time it rains. And you cannot get to the metro station, either walking or driving along half of Wheelie Avenue. And that really has been around for years. And it's probably good to address flooding. I know that would be an unusual topic for Reston, and we perhaps don't want to bring up our sore spots, but those two are particularly outstanding. The other one I can think of is outside of Reston. It's along Lawyers Road. There are emergency vehicles come all up and down there, and the flooding is caused by Reston development. Even though the flooding occurs downstream, it's because existing Reston development, it was developed before there were stormwater management schools. So it might be worth a paragraph to mention that. The second one is the streams and wetlands. I would suggest maybe a map of the streams with their RPAs that would go along with the text. It might work out. And the three areas that I can think of that might be there, some of these are already in the plan, but maybe they could be put in a paragraph instead of scattered. One is the Herndon Monroe wetlands that somebody already mentioned. That's supposed to be mitigated in some way in the future. Two is, I know RA is working on the stream restoration projects. And I think some of the ones left are the Snake Den branch, and there's some others. And then the third one is the ponds that are part of the old distillery. Those need to be mentioned in the plan. We're going to have some applications there. They're struggling with that now. So maybe addressing this flooding and the wetlands. Another, what we might mention is, I guess I got a little confused. Is there a difference between the TSAs and the neighborhoods on these environmental issues? That might be worth a look at the reading. And then perhaps the redevelopment sites. We've got a lot of redevelopment sites and they escape the environmental standards, and perhaps addressing that in some way. And we talked about if it's part of if you have a site that's saving a couple buildings and then infilling a couple buildings, maybe the whole site should be a green neighborhood or a biophilic neighborhood. And the last one is, and this is a little more off the wall, is establishing a forest plan or a tree action plan for Reston. I know the county has one, but maybe Reston ought to have one if we're going to be a biophilic community. This would be a combination of RA, VDOT of all people, FDOT, and probably the parks. That's a thought to create a tree plan for Reston. We don't. I was looking around. I think we have 4 trees in the right of way in Reston. 4 in all of our right of ways. There may be a few more, but VDOT is a little lax on those issues. But some cities have forest conservation plans for the whole city. Maybe it would be worth a thought or two. So anyway, again, the graphics, I would add that at least the streams and the watersheds in Reston. So Yeah, I think it was a thorough effort. I hope it's in sync with the policy plan. I don't know what happens when it's different from when you have a comp plan that's different from the policy plan. But we seem to be doing that in other comp plans. So why not? Let's go for it. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, there are a couple of hands up. Let's go to those and then see if we're close to wrapping up this discussion. I know you're getting a lot of feedback and input here, Bill and Tammy. I see Mark Malcolm, then Gary Moffett.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Alcorn. A little bit to Herndon Monroe, since I live adjacent, and a little bit about mosquitoes. First, on the property that has the wetland 2235, 2245 Monroe Street, which is through the LLC is through an intermediary, but Massachusetts Mutual owns it. There are two stormwater dry ponds on that property on the north side, primarily for the building structures. When you look to the lower area on that, the property that's owned by JBG Smith, not aware that it has any stormwater elements to it, and it does tend to flood a little bit toward its back. Then there are two more stormwater things on the west side of the Sprint owned property. Okay, then for the mention of a huge 4-acre or more stormwater pond, that actually is built on the Board of Supervisors property for where the current plan would call for two huge office buildings or residential structures of roughly 2.1 million square feet each that we've walked. And you started to see the construction of a little more than a year ago of that stormwater area. It does not have any real flooding except in the center area. And it has, in 25 years, I've never seen it spill over into Sunrise Valley or really have an impact on the properties. With one other question that was in the chat, Jennifer Jutchuk asked about potential development of the wetland. The deed that was done on this property does allow that wetland to be moved. If it goes through a large set of things with the Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. But it would be somewhere else, not necessarily anywhere in Virginia, but anywhere within Region 1. I had looked at this roughly 4.5 years ago when high concern with the potential developments around the wetland. It was expressed in the prior comprehensive plan as being a great feature for this TSA. However, it's privately owned and public access is extremely limited. Anyway, questions regarding that?
Mark, I'll ask you a question just so everybody knows. Why was that wetland created? What was it offsetting?
It was offsetting off of Reston Parkway at the North Point Village Shopping Center, an existing wetland. It was moved to allow development at that site. The wetland was relocated by Reston Land Corporation to the site at Herndon Monroe. Does that help?
Yes, and I believe wasn't also part of Reston Town Center. I believe some of it was offset by that as well.
I am not sure about that.
Yeah, Larry might know, but that's okay.
Yeah, I can chime in real quick. There were about roughly 20 parcels that had wetland impacts in Reston, and Reston Land consolidated all the mitigation efforts for those parcels, which did include Reston Town Center, and created the 4-acre wetland to mitigate for all those smaller pieces, primarily through in Town Center and North Reston.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Good history there. So I see Gary has his hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to go back to Bill's comment on, you've taken all the noise levels from the previous plan. And so they're really intended to be what the current standards are. Is that what you're saying throughout this document? Going back to your earlier comment. And by the way, great job by you and Tammy. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I find all the different dB numbers beyond my sphere of knowledge and didn't have time to go try and research it all. So I just took what was there, assuming it must be right if it's in the comp plan now. And as far as I can tell, as far as I understand, it has worked fairly well with developers doing noise studies and mitigation measures. And if that's not true, that's fine, but that's my understanding.
I just live in a place where it's kind of noise sensitive, so just following up with a couple other comments here about making sure we're addressing that. So thanks again, Bill and Tammy.
All right, and thank you, Gary. Do we have any other comments or questions on this section? Okay. Well, Bill, Tammy, thank you very much. I think make a lot of progress on this. And Bill, in terms of next steps, are you guys gonna try to pull the update some of this stuff based on feedback?
I will, and the door is open for people to email us with additional suggestions before we bring it back to you. But yeah, sometime fairly soon we will try and bring it back to you.
Okay, great. And Bill, I know there were some comments, suggestions in the chat as well. So.
I'm copying those now.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Very good. Then let's move on. We have about 24 minutes till the top of the hour. Now we're going to go back to John Carter, who will continue his review of TSA. I want to say TSA areas, which I guess is right. So transit station areas. John, go ahead and take it away. What do you have for us tonight?
Okay, let's see if I can share my screen here.
Should be able to now, John.
Let's see. Okay, I think where we left off, we were just beginning to do the association drive, and we wanted to wait till we heard from the Heritage Resources. We didn't do Plaza America yet, and then we would want to go back through the transit stations themselves. So I've found this map that shows the colors and the circles. So those are the transit areas we'll cover tonight. But why don't we start with Association Drive? And what we said last time was we wanted to improve the connections from Association Drive to the metro stations, either by street or pedestrian ways. We wanted to incorporate any heritage resources, which I guess we don't have much information on that. We wanted a new road layout. We wanted complete streets with the trees and the lights and all those things. Tree preservation was an important consideration on this site. The soapstone connection that goes across the toll road here. And then my last comment was tree preservation, hopefully the best in Reston. So why don't I just throw it open to anyone who wants to suggest some items. My approach here is just to go through these one at a time and listen to all of the comments and then take those comments and create the actual chapter. So now's your chance.
Yeah, sorry, it's Lynn.
That's good.
Again, we're seeing these concentric circles showing.
Yes.
I'm guessing that's the 1/4 and 1/2 mile
Yes, it is.
distance. Is there some way that we could put just a little walking man icon in there so that
Yeah, there is.
developers know that that is the walking distance and it's not the developable area?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I think when we put this in the land use plan, we won't put the circles in the actual land use portion itself.
Okay.
It's the colors that we should be paying attention to. I used the circles for this point just to figure out where the quarter and a half mile is. But when we get to the land use, I don't think we'll be using the circles.
John,
It may be helpful for folks to know that that's a walking distance, but I just want to make sure that we're not confusing the developers or builders who have previously mistaken those with developable area.
Yes, we're not proposing to redevelop polo fields in Herndon Monroe or
No.
the golf courses south,
No,
or the golf course in the north, or the town center for that matter.
Thank you.
I think that's a valid point, but your solution, which I think you might have brought up last time, that those don't need to be, shown there the way they are.
Right.
Probably the right solution.
Yeah.
John, this is Chris Daniel. So is your revision going to include updates? Are we going to keep the development review performance objectives? Are those part of what you're going to be working on here?
Yes, and that's what that list was. That will be put into a development criteria for it.
Because I had made some revisions to that I'll be happy to share with you that I shared with Jose that kind of integrate a few things in there. But I was just curious how you might want me to convey that.
Just send it to Jose. That would be
all right.
Yeah,
will do.
Are there any things you would like to say now?
I think in particular the two major changes I offered was obviously I threw in you shouldn't be surprised something about considering heritage resources and highlighting that as good design when it does occur. And another one was really trying to tie some language to the equity and community health section, just a link back language, wanting to highlight those goals. And the other one was kind of oriented towards the design and I think I saw that in the environmental section that we currently state LEED silver. I really wanted to push for gold. I really feel like we should push for a higher standard in Reston, but that's those are the key takeaways. And I threw a little bit more in there about highlighting exceptional architecture and design because I want to keep making that a priority in Reston's new construction, that we eventually have our future API buildings is the idea, that we have architecture that we have built now that will one day be considered really historic in its own right, when we're all potentially much older.
I'm writing madly, so
I will, like I said, I'll share. I think I've shared it with Jose already, but and Jose said he just sent it to you. So there we go.
It's hard to get the nuances though in those. So I appreciate it.
Hey, John, this is Bill Penniman. Will these slides be available? I find them pretty hard to actually read.
Yes.
So they're just, everything's small. So anyway, if we can get that, we can give you comments.
Yes, you need a bigger monitor, Bill.
Maybe.
Yes.
I need.
I'll send you. This is in a PowerPoint format. I can send you the whole thing.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you.
John Carter, there's also one other question I have regarding the Herndon Monroe one.
We're not there yet. We're not at the Herndon Monroe.
I'll shut up and wait.
So, John, this is Mark. Can I ask a question? I missed last week's meeting, so you may have explained this before. But I see kind of two actual colors, and then there's kind of, I'll call it a grayed out space in various locations. And I see I'll call it the purple closest to the metro. Then there's the crosshatch portions that in some locations are a deeper color, in other locations are a lighter color. The light color that's not deep purple, nor is it crosshatched, what does that area represent?
That's
So
the
like,
non, I guess last week we called them the non-TOD areas, and we went through them, each one of them individually. We basically didn't make, I mean, I'm making a long story short here, and probably not doing it a good service, but we basically left everything alone in the lightest pink area,
okay,
except for the area on Wheelie, east of Wheelie, south of the Dulles Airport, where we suggested there could be some housing to replace existing spaces, but office, but within the density that's already on those sites. So the industrial density, which varies from 0.5 to 1.0.
okay. So if
But that's a
that's the,
long story short. We went through each one of them in a lot of detail.
if that's the case, then let's go back to what Tammy and Dennis and I were talking about earlier, which is the second phase of the Roland Clark Place
Yes.
project, which is here listed as not colored and not crosshatched. Does that mean that the comp plan language that's in the comp plan now would stay in terms of the recommendations for that site?
Yes.
Or are we changing it? Okay.
No, that means it would stay so far.
Okay.
I don't know that we really discussed that in any detail. We discussed it more tonight than we did last week.
Right. So then the same thing, I guess the western half of, I'm assuming the western half of Association Drive would stay the same as well, because it looks like,
yes,
at least according to this map, it gets truncated where you have the 1.5 number there, or maybe it's all of Association Drive.
I think all of Association Drive is within the hatched mark. You can see, it's hard to see, but soapstone is coming up. And so it's basically the soapstone boundary there. So all of Association Drive, yes, is in, of that property owner, is within the hatched.
And the recommended dwelling units that you have within the cross-hatched areas, those are specific to that land bay, or are those all of like the south side of the toll road and the north side of the toll road combined? Or better yet, I guess the non-cross-hatched color areas, is that yeah, looking at the bottom map here, right?
Yeah,
So
if you
like,
look at the bottom map, so
yeah.
that's in the 75-25 area.
Okay.
So that was your concern on the Roland Clark Place.
Yeah, but I think we can deal with that in a different section, or that's not listed in that particular land bay. That's applicable. If you go back one map or one slide, the 75-25 split is applicable to every location where you have that darkish brown red color, not just the Roland Clark Place area, but everything colored that color.
Right. So we didn't make any changes to that last week.
Well, I'll throw it out there for consideration that there are a few sites that are relatively small, where you've got maybe one building, perhaps two, where there's a replacement of, call it a 3 or 4 or 5 story building with one or possibly two buildings. And the way the comp plan currently reads, and I'll paraphrase it, and I said this earlier, but it has the 75-25 expectation that all of the areas in the brownish red color collectively will, at build out, represent approximately 75% residential and 25% non-residential. And the plan goes on to say that that should not be applied on a site-by-site basis, but should be applied across the entirety of a TSA, or each TSA. The challenge became that when zoning applications came forward, the interpretation was that that requirement should be applied on a site-by-site basis as opposed to a macro basis. And so when you have one building replacing a 5-story building being replaced with a 15-story building or a 10-story building, it's market-wise impossible to provide 25% of the square footage in a 10-story building as non-residential. And so my recommendation would be that we delete that 75-25 requirement altogether and talk about how in key locations providing secondary support uses would be encouraged, but to let the market really dictate what goes into these peripheral areas in terms of vertical mixed use within a project. Because as much as we might will having you know, a dry cleaners or a restaurant go in some of these locations, the visibility and access to it is what's going to drive whether non-residential uses are successful in those locations, as opposed to you know, a desire to have it be so, particularly as we come out of the current environment where retail was already struggling.
Well, why don't we see what that means exactly? I don't know whether there's a stomach to actually change the 75-25. I'm not sure about that, but I think, and I think it's already in the plan, although it doesn't say so very well, that the 75-25 was supposed to be an area and not necessarily site by site. I know it hasn't been treated that way necessarily on a lot of these applications. But before we start making the changes, why don't we see, I'm sure you have an idea of what those sites are that you're talking about. And we might have a way of fixing that. One of them that we did go over last week was the area in Wheelie East next to Campus Commons. Oh, no, it's next to the EYA development. There's a hole in there.
Right.
And so we did address that one. Let's see if I can find that.
That's Samuel Morris Drive.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the issue, at least on this,
it would be better to find situations like that rather than wholesale get away from the 75-25. I hate to do that at this point, but we'll bring it back, the rear part, and we'll just see where we can go.
John, I'm sorry. This is Lynn. I've had my hand up for previous discussions, and I took it down in the interest of time. But I just have to say that I think if we start relaxing any of these requirements that form the basis of what makes Reston Reston, whether it's a 50-50 or a 75-25, we are going to lose what makes Reston an area that is a planned community and an area where people can live, work, and play. So we've got the live and the work and the play. We have got to accommodate all of those. And if you start relaxing any of those requirements, you're going to lose sight. I mean, we are going to lose what this planned community is.
I agree with that notion, and we also have a lot of developers that have approved plans that are based on the 50-50 or the 75-25, and they probably would be disappointed in us start changing it. But let's see, Mark, maybe you have some specific sites like the one I mentioned next to EYA.
I think the short answer is the farther from Metro it is, the harder it is to get the retail in there. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, and then actually we have several hands up. So Bill, go ahead, and then Charles.
Yeah, John, could you go back to your last slide, the one that had the numbers on it? Is this out of a county document, or is this something that got made up for this? I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at
It's a county document. Yeah.
Okay.
And those FARs are pretty much what we have. That's what those numbers are.
Okay. what puzzles me is looking at the north side of the toll road at Wheelie. You have the purple ending pretty close to Wheelie itself. And I believe there's already been development approved in that light gray area. Now, obviously, I can't tell distances on here, but I'd like to go see. Somehow I thought it extended out to the half mile, when it was addressed before, but I can take a look, and once I get this, I can try and dig further. Thank you.
Yes, it does extend out. It even extends past the half mile. It extends on, and we talked about that's what Mark and I were just talking about, that area. You're talking about where it says 1.5 to 2.5.
Yes, and the big green box that's pale in the middle, I think there's already been some
right
TOD approved there.
Yes, there is.
Okay, well.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Bill. Charles, and then maybe Gary. I think Gary has his hand up. Charles, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, John. I
there.
like what you've got so far. I was just going to talk about that area, the Association Drive section.
Yes.
Is one of the few areas now where you have some openness. And I had even thought that several landowners there at one point wanted to do a joint sale to a single owner. But I'm not, probably doesn't have any bearing on this, but it just seems it's like the last opportunity to create sort of a real urban park without forcing a lot of land being taken away from developers. That is, if they could coordinate, you would have something that could be accessed by the increased population there. And then when the connector goes in, people can cross over from the other area. Maybe there's room for that or a way of encouraging that. But I'm concerned that a lot of the denser development that's going up now along the transit area, even the less dense, are not actually putting in a lot of the same level of recreation space as you have in the older clusters. And I think people are going to need just parks, not playing fields, things like that, but just places to go.
The topography and the amount of trees and existing building layout might lend itself to a real urban park, whether it's on Sunrise Valley or whether it's internal. I think we could work on. Good idea.
We're just encouraging them to do it. I'm not saying that they can't develop and it becomes a big park, but encourage them to set aside a common large area. Thanks.
Thank you,
Will
Charles.
it be part of the criteria that would go with this site?
Yeah, I was going to say that could be part of a development criteria. Criterion. I see Tammy has her hand up.
Thank you. My sorrow is observing the current TSA production of what's been built since 2015 is not inspirational regarding attractiveness or good planning. And I'm just heartsick to hear about how, we're leveraging this parcel or that parcel to get 25, 75, or whatever it is. How about talking about how we can make it livable instead of maximizing profit? We are supposed to be the leader in climate change, and this is not helping when we're maximizing every square foot of every parcel for commercial or, I guess profit, whether it's commercial buildings being built or residential. How can we not suggest that there be adequate trees? Like the Association Drive is the perfect example. Thank you, Charles Colby. You're 100% on target here. Some of the most beautiful trees in Reston are here, and the plan that came in that was before the P&Z did not even begin to recognize that, and it looked like the plan just was looked like Arlington Cemetery with with townhouses lined up in rows with absolutely no paying attention to topography or what's there now that is so beautiful. So I just have to keep saying this. We are biophilic. I want the plans that are coming forward, the comments that are coming forward from our friends who are the attorneys for the owners to please be sensitive to that and help us fight climate change. It's up to all of us, not just residential owners trying to recycle and plant trees and whatever. It's up to every single person on this task force to come together to write a plan that fights climate change. We can't get there if everybody is still after their original tightly focused profit margin motives. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
All right, thank you, Tammy. So
You want to go on?
John, yeah, we're pretty much to the top of the hour, but why don't you keep going? Let's see what happens.
Plaza America would be the next.
Okay, let's do Plaza America. Let's keep
It's
going.
not so much Plaza America itself. It's between Plaza America and the hatched mark where it says Sunset Hills Road there north of the toll road. So there's several low-rise buildings of all sorts. A dry cleaner, a health club is in there. Other assorted, there's a Montessori school in there. So unless we're doing something else, I'm not sure what the zoning is on that. Because I don't have that. No changes are proposed though. No comments? Okay.
Any comments? Yeah, John, keep going. Let's go
Okay.
just a few minutes later if
So now let's go
okay.
back. So now we would go actually the areas within the 1.5 mile, Herndon Monroe, Town Center, and Wheelie. Maybe we ought to start with the Herndon Monroe. And a lot of that is approved. The outstanding site is the county site in the middle where it says 1.5 to 2.5. So I don't have any special comments, so I'd love to hear from people.
Mark Malcolm,
Walter,
recall
do you know
that
what's planned for that?
What's that?
I'm asking Walter, does he have any, I can't get any answer to what's being planned for that. Is that available for civic use?
It is planned as in the comprehensive plan as 1.5 to 2.5. It talks about some combination of commercial and affordable housing. You know, at this point, I've talked with the Economic Development Authority about, you know, to see if there is any interest from, you know, somebody who might want to make use of that. If it's not going to be a real economic development, I would call it jewel, then it probably will end up needing to be more on the affordable housing side or maybe some combination of that and more on the community use side.
How many acres are actually still vacant and not taken up with the garage?
I believe, Mark, what is it, like 10 or 11, something like that?
between 13 and 14 acres.
Okay, 13,
If
14.
you take it, and with that specifically, the existing comprehensive plan called for basically two structures that exceeded the FAR. One, an office type building that would handle 2.1 million square feet. And with reference to how residential, 1,050 units on the Board of Supervisor property.
How many units?
1,050. It equates to another 2.1 million square feet. Excuse me. With that, I restate it, 2,100 units that would equate to 1,050 square feet each. It was just unbelievable to me.
Say it again, because I can't comprehend it. 2,000?
Yeah, Tammy, it's 1.5 to 2.5 FAR.
Right.
And it's right up next to the metro. And, you know, so, I mean, that's what it is.
But one of the good things that happens to be right on the edge of that is one of the best walking paths that's now been electrified with lighting going from the apartments that are on the west side of Monroe Street. What I had started to ask a question to John Carter regarding the number of units. Number of units that were on the west side, basically, of Monroe Street. That number has decreased slightly with the things that may be the accurate number now, with the townhouses that replaced a couple of apartment buildings that had been originally been done. That's reaching build out for. It still calls for 2 other office buildings that have been previously approved to be built adjacent to the toll road that could be developed later.
What did you say
is
the
what-
office was? How much office?
Okay, on the west side of Monroe Street, previously approved by the county, were 2 office buildings. One to be, if I recall correctly, 18 stories high, the other one 14 stories high, but they were having mostly above ground in the building parking, not below ground. One of the things that's a little bit unusual that you got to remember, just like Wheelie, there's the potential for large development if there is underground parking able to be done through this corridor a little bit. Herndon hasn't chosen to do that on the other side. There are 2 major property developers that I'm aware of that have plans for the other side, and they've been revised a couple of times. Okay, with that, so what you have for then there is one remaining thing on the west side for what is the mixed use development that you have at 0.50 FAR. For the JBG Smith property, it got subdivided. They built a parking garage a year and a half ago so that Pulte bought property to develop what was originally to be 44 townhomes, not the 298 units, and that got reduced to 40, and it may be reduced to 36 or 38 in the revisions that are being done right now.
Review with the chamber.
That amount of development that you're talking about would be significantly above the 1.5 to 2.5.
Oh, absolutely. Supervisor Alcorn and I had that discussion March of 20 when we walked that land.
Right before the pandemic.
Actually, just before everything got shut down, but it was in the process of that. Do remember
That's
that
right.
quite well. No more mud for you to walk through.
No, I do too, Mark. I tell you what I'd propose, John, is Mark makes some good points. What I'd like to do is continue this discussion to the next meeting, because I think this does deserve more fleshing out, more discussion by the task force. So, and since we're running after 9 already, let's start with this, or the other TODs, and put that on the agenda. Mark, is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah, because we're just starting to get into it. John, that works for you?
Yes, that works. There's probably
Okay.
not too much to say about the town center and Wheelie that we haven't covered. So it's mostly probably Herndon, Monroe, and we have to come back with North Town Center as well.
Town Center North, that's right. That's exactly right. All right. Well, very good. So anyone else have any other matters they want to bring before the task force before we break? Okay. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Really good discussion tonight. I think Had some very good feedback from the earlier things. Thank you to everybody who's working so hard on this. I really appreciate everything everyone's doing. We will be coming back as a full task force in a couple of weeks. There will obviously be some additional meetings between now and then. I know Jennifer's got meetings scheduled, and also keep your eye on your email because I do expect to see some documents coming around on that. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you all soon.
Good night.